Good afternoon, Wednesday, February 26th, 2025. We are with Damian Leonard, our Ledge Counsel, and we are working on the T-bill, potential T-bill language, following up on our presentation earlier with town highway programs. We are now looking at, potentially going to look at some language that would be associated with what we had talked about in terms of the town highway aid structures, class 2 road programs. Welcome, Damian. You've got this and actually the whole rest of the afternoon we're going to be with you on subjects. So let's get started. Well, welcome. Fire away.
Great. For the record, I'm Damian Leonard from the Office of Legislative Counsel. I hope everyone enjoyed their lunch. Let me share my screen here and we'll just get right to it. So I do want to note that not every change that has been discussed in the committee is in this bill yet. I know there is a change to the fishing language and the rail trails that's not in here. There are a couple of other things too that are on the to-do list where I just don't have enough details yet to draft anything. And I think there are things that the committee is considering and looking into that I haven't been here for the discussion of. So just want to mention that if you see something that's missing, it's not because I decided to just leave it out. But it would be good at the end if there are things that are missing, just to make sure that everyone's on the same page. And I have it on my to-do list. So the very first start, hold it up on the screen. Behind me is just the subject heading. This is a
Is that the best way that it presents, or is that how it's supposed to be? Is there like a start the slideshow thing? Or
oh yeah, no, you're actually looking at my screen in Word.
Cool.
Yep. So nope, there's no slideshow. So but I can minimize the ribbon. Yep, I do something. It's okay. I'm not gonna worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
You guys are gonna see the limitations of my technical ability here. So anyway, this is just subject headings. I didn't add them in the first draft. I've started adding them now. As you have new subjects show up in here, I'll add these. They're sort of a nonpartisan keyword search sort of thing. So it doesn't actually affect any of the substance of the bill. Okay, the next piece here is, as you'll remember, there was technical correction needed for the rail language issue. So we've added that to section 1. And I would look to just the agency to let me know at some point. Doesn't have to be right now if this accomplishes what you're looking for or if we need further tweaks. So what we're doing is we're deleting the Barry Berlin Montpelier WACR subsidy language, and we're replacing it with the Hartford White River Junction rail station roof language. This is a 1-for-1 exchange, $260,000 for both projects, and it was just an error in the language there. So seeing Michelle nodding, so I think I did it okay. But again, if there are additional changes, I'll circle up with AOT. This is just making sure the program reflects what was intended. All right, skipping ahead and go way down the bill. By the way, the bill almost tripled in length with this draft. So
I didn't see that yet.
Oh, I believe I come back, it was 10.
It was 10.
28.
We're starting on page 11 now, and we're up to 28. So, so we're adding now to the transportation board sections. This area, these were proposed by the Public Utility Commission when they testified last week. So most of the changes here, the only substantive change is changing Public Utility Commission to Transportation Board. That said, when we get to, I think sections 11 through 15, we're going to want to stop and talk about those because that's an area of law that you may want to push over to your Environment and Energy Committee And I'll explain why. You'll understand in a moment. So 20 VSA section 3065. We don't say regulations for Vermont. That's something the federal government does. We adopt rules. So I updated that, and then Transportation Board. For 24 VSA 5106, again, the only change is Public Utility Commission to Transportation Board. The may impose any regulatory transportation provisions. I struck from time to time because you don't need that language. It's implied. You can impose regulations from time to time as you determine necessary without the words from time to time. Oh, it's not section 11. So section 11 here, just for reference, I should have been clear about this. The section 10 relates to regional transit authorities that are not chartered. Section 11 relates to Green Mountain Transit Authority. There is language from the agency on adjusting where Green Mountain Transit Authority routes will be. What I would suggest is that when I add that in the next draft, we move this language in with that if the change is okay with you. Because it just doesn't make sense to group it with the Transportation Board when we're going to be amending the Transit Authority Charter. So this is the Transit Authority's charter here. Currently, it says Public Utility Commission can impose regulatory provisions from Title 30 on the Transit Authority. It's really the Transportation Board that has that authority. So this is just updating that. The other language I only got today, so it's not in the draft yet. I'm seeing some questions.
Representative White?
Yeah, pardon me, I'm back on page 11, Damien, and for this language about shall be imprisoned not more than 18 months or fined not more than $2,000.
Yes.
Can you remind me what that's regarding?
Yeah, thank you. That is a really good question. Let me just pull that up really quickly. And because I have forgotten off the top of my head which piece of law that is. And I apologize, I've had this and the motor vehicle bill have been amending at the same time. This is transportation of explosives and fireworks.
Okay.
The sections that's referring to prohibit the transportation, carrying, or conveyance of dynamite, gunpowder, or other explosives on a vessel or vehicle when the vessel or vehicle is also carrying passengers, or transporting intrastate nitroglycerin, fulminate, and bulk in dry condition or other like explosives when you're transporting passengers. And then it also requires marking packages that contain these things. So it's basically regulations on the transportation of explosives, particularly when passengers are also in the same vehicle. Makes sense. So that's what that's relating to. And this used to be something that because it's common carriers, Public Utility Commission used to have authority. It's now with the Transportation Board, and they're more focused on utilities.
Representative Pop?
Yeah, sorry, sort of go backwards a little bit. So the move from the oversight and rules adopted by the Public Utility Commission to the Transportation Board. Has the Transportation Board been doing it lately and now just putting it down, right? Or
So my understanding, and I haven't talked to the Transportation Board about this, my understanding, the request comes from the Public Utilities Commission. And it originally came into another attorney in our office asking if it could be put in a technical corrections bill. We felt that it made more sense to put it in with the committees of jurisdiction because of the change in jurisdiction, just to make sure there aren't issues. And there are actually some issues, which I'm going to get to in a couple of sections, where the law actually probably should be repealed. but it's also probably not something that the Transportation Committee should be considering because it relates to logging. And we'll get to that in a section. But in this case, these were proposed as technical corrections by the Public Utility Commission. I would recommend hearing from the Transportation Board or someone representing the Transportation Board, making sure that they agree that this is the proper change.
That they have the proper oversight.
Right. And that's, and that is something that I don't have that information yet. So
Sorry, go ahead, Representative Cook.
So there are public transportation systems that aren't chartered, and then there are big transit
Yep.
is chartered,
So
but the same.
it's the same
almost The
language.
same language, not quite
Yeah.
the same, but
24 VSA 5106 covers the other public transportation
okay.
agencies and systems. And then Green Mountain Transit was chartered in 1973. And so they have their own charter, but they're the only public transit authority that has that charter. Yeah.
They're following the same.
The language is, like you said, it's very, very close to
All
identical.
right, thank you.
And you see that throughout the statutes there. So like I said, with the Transit Authority, the next draft, I'm going to have further amendments to that. So I will just pull that out of the Transportation Board adjustments, because when we're going to amend the charter, we're going to amend the whole charter in one section. And it'll be multiple sections. So all of those changes will be together instead of having two different sections amending the same charter. Does that make sense?
I'm just trying to figure out, how did this get in here again?
So last week you heard testimony from the Public Utilities Commission
Yeah,
where they requested, and for about 30 seconds at the beginning, they said, we sent you language. And I got direction to put the language in the next draft so the committee could look at it.
you said.
So-
From who?
I think I got that from the chair. I was sitting in the corner back there.
Well, when we were talking about, I guess I'm section 7, which was 1 page long, to all of a sudden, so their entire PUC correction, Catherine Dimitri testified in regards to what I thought was one particular piece in here. If you'd like to comment, please do.
Yeah,
So, Mr. Chair, what we have here is two separate things related to the Transportation Board going on.
yes.
So, Rachel Dimitri, not Catherine.
I'm sorry, I wrote that down on here somewhere. Hopefully I didn't write it down wrong. Oh,
Yeah. So Rachel.
we worked, this one's Rachel.
Yeah.
Yes.
She was here with us
Mhm.
on the proposals that we had brought forth for some changes to the timelines on appeals process for municipalities who are trying to who don't want to, who are petitioning to not pay back their match. So there was that.
Right.
And then I think Friday you had the Public Utility Commission come in. And that's where I think Damien's referring to them having this other information about cleaning up their section of statute for things the T-Board actually does now.
And so that I probably should have put in separate reader assistance heading that said Transportation Board jurisdiction or something like that. But yes, there are two different pieces and I just combined them under Transportation Board. The Public Utilities Commission, we didn't take any testimony from them on Friday beyond we were asked to give you this. And then my understanding was put it in the draft so we can look at it and discuss it. But if I misunderstood, I apologize.
I'm not
And
ready to say
so,
what did or
yeah.
didn't happen. I think that's,
Could be in there.
If it's, and it can come out just as easily as it went in. There are some things in here, like I mentioned, and we're getting to them in the very next section, section 12, where my impression is that you are going to want to send this to another committee because it deals with log drives, which I can't imagine you want to spend time taking testimony on the Clean Water Act and other issues around log drives, let alone when the last time Vermont had a log drive was. So my understanding is that this language was up for repeal a number of years ago, but a particular chair loved the history of it and didn't want to see it disappear and thought, what's the harm of leaving it on the books if it's not happening? I don't know the full story, but that's the rumor I've heard about why this language is even still in the statute. So this is something where I'm not sure you want to keep it in, but because it was in their proposal, I put it in.
I think that there's a bit of a misunderstanding in terms of where we were at and what we were, what I thought we were doing in regards to section 7 versus this additional spot. I debated whether we should take a break and do that conversation offline, but this is one of those spots. It's easy to say as they shouldn't select chair by height, and there is clearly a misunderstanding about what I thought we were doing and not doing on this particular.
No problem. So I apologize.
Taking that.
I'm just going to skip over these sections and move on to the next piece. So I don't want to waste your time, and
Well, I don't want to do that to you either.
Sorry.
Are we keeping in sections 10 and 11, but removing the whatever, section 12? And
No,
So
13? I just, what are we doing?
we're not, 10 on is going to be reviewed and
yeah, 9 on actually.
9 on. We're only going through eight. We're only going through 8 at this point, and from 9 on is on hold in terms we understand that it's related to what the PUC may want an adjustment. I'm only looking to adjust the part that the PUC and the Transportation Board crisscrossed on this Transportation Board section.
So just for purposes of clarity, 12 through 16 are the log drives, which you may want to recommend that they just get sent somewhere else to be looked at as a possible repeal. And then
Big enough for a long drive.
Connecticut River, which has now got dams on it.
I mean, tough to get over that.
Yeah, there's actually a dam that's up for relicensing that uses the canal that used to be used to get the cargo past the falls there at Bellows Falls. But now there's a hydro dam that uses that canal to supply the water. So anyway,
Went off on a tangent here, didn't I?
yeah,
Since we're doing that, at one point Burlington was the #1 lumber port in the entire United States for a period of years too. So, there's all kinds of things. Thank you. There's all kinds of things that happened that way.
Second in the world, I think.
It was,
so anyway, if we skip ahead to the very bottom of page 15 and the top of page 16, we get past all of the PUC changes.
and that's where we wanted to.
And I will pull it up on the screen. So this is getting to town highway subsidies.
This is, yes, this is a yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I apologize for that. So I clearly misunderstood.
So just so I'm clear, are those sections, is it 9 and 10 going away too? Everything's coming.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so-
Where we're at.
9 through 17 were the PUC proposals.
Okay.
So I am going to make a note to myself to take them out. So what this would do is this amends section 18 here, amends the state aid for town highways. And what I've done here is I have drafted this to match up to what roughly what we did last year with the subsection A in this section, which is the state aid for, I think that's the basic state aid for town highways. And now we're going to disadjust state aid for town highway structures and class 2 town highways. So the annual appropriation here The language at the top provides there's an annual appropriation for grants for the maintenance and construction of bridges and culverts and other structures. And what this then adds is this appropriation shall increase over the previous fiscal year's appropriation by the same percentage change as the following, whichever is less, or shall remain at the previous fiscal year's appropriation if either of the following are negative or zero. This tracks almost 100% with last year's language, and as far as the effect of it tracks with that. So the percentage change in the agency's total appropriations funded by transportation fund revenues, excluding appropriations for town highway structures under this subsection for the most recently closed fiscal year, as compared to the fiscal year immediately preceding, or the percentage change in the Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers, which is based on the 2 prior fiscal years. And I'll get to that calculation below. So what this is basically saying is if the CPI went up by 5%, but the transportation fund only grew by 1%, this appropriation would only grow by 1%. If they both went down, it would stay flat. So what you could see is in an instance where the transportation fund is declining, you would see increased pressure from town highway structures on the transportation fund. In an instance where the transportation fund is increasing slower than inflation, you will see it staying steady with the transportation fund. In an instance where the transportation fund is growing faster than inflation, you will actually see this just stick to inflation. There are instances where this will have a negligible effect on the transportation fund, a diminishing impact, or an increasing impact, depending on what the economy is doing and how the fund is changing. The calculation currently provides this struck out language here that sets a base of 7.2 million at a minimum as new grants. This is a fixed base. The agency can go above that, but they have to provide the base. So my understanding is that in past years you have gone above this amount, but this is the base that you return to. So what this would do moving forward is start looking at the previous fiscal year and building off of that. So you don't need a base anymore in here because you've already got it based on whatever you appropriated before this.
And it can't go backwards.
It cannot go backwards.
It's level funded, but it can't go backwards.
That's right.
It cannot increase, but it can't go backwards.
That's right.
And the committee still has the option, if they want to find a way to put more money in it, that would be still available, but
Yeah.
but it will increase when it works. When the formula works, it will increase, and when it doesn't, it will stay flat.
That's right. So you can supplement the formula funding. You can always not withstand the statute. And that's the other thing too, is if something catastrophic happened and the T fund plummeted for whatever reason and there wasn't funding available, you could always not withstand this and zero it out for a year or something like that. And we have done similar things with things like the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund following the major spike in claims in the pandemic. We did some gymnastics with the formula for that to make sure that we weren't going to bankrupt the trust fund or the employers paying into it. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, current year for the town highway structures is like 8,016,000.
Okay.
The proposed governor's recommend is
Back
7
to
million.
the base.
So are we using, so what will we use here?
So the way this is worded, so this would take effect July 1.
Yeah.
So this would be going into next year. So they would be building off that 7.2
Oh,
million.
7,
So,
the 8 last year.
yeah. So this is going to say that because we're going to approve that before this law change takes effect.
Okay.
And so, and that will be effective on the same day as this.
Okay. So. that's
So,
the question.
yeah.
Right, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so what would happen next year is if let's say the T fund grew by 3% and inflation was 3%, you would see that 7.2 million increase by 3%.
Thank you.
And then the language in C here just uses the CPI calculation. What this basically says is that you use the June 30th in the calendar year, 1 year prior to the first day of the fiscal year. So you basically use June as the base point for your CPI. That's your second year CPI. Your first year that you're comparing it to get your growth is 2 years prior to the fiscal year start. Does that make sense? So let's say July 2025 for fiscal year 26. So what you would look at is your CPI data from June of 2024 versus June of 2023 to get your CPI increase. Does that everyone follow? And that's the way it's set up for the town highway funding for class 1 town highways.
Representative Towns?
And I'm sure we knew this at one time, or I did, and that CPI number comes from,
Bureau of Labor Statistics. Assuming they are still producing those numbers going forward, then that will continue to use that. So that's a baseline for most of our inflators. There are other inflation indexes that we could pivot to that are put out by like the Federal Reserve Bank and things like that. So if we do get to a point where the US Department of Labor decides not to provide this information, then we can pivot to a different inflator from a different entity. So all right. The next changes in here are just, I'm sorry.
yeah. it's not
I will-
on the screen.
I'm just going to skip ahead to the next subsection we're amending and pull it back up on the screen. Sorry about that. I'm clearly off my game today. So there we go. So this is the class 2 town highways. What I skipped over were just renumbering 2 subsections at the end of or subdivisions at the end of that subsection. There were no changes to the actual language there. So what this provides is funding for paved or unpaved class 2 town highways, and then municipalities that have no state highways or class 1 town highways can use these grants for both class 2 and class 3 town highways. That is not changing. We're taking out the base funding of 8.6 million as the minimum for new grants. And then we're saying the appropriation shall increase over the previous year's appropriation by the same percentage change as following, whichever is less. And again, we're looking at T-fund growth versus growth in the CPI produced by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And just like before, we are calculating that increase or decrease based on the 2 prior fiscal years' percentage change. And the reason we have that offset is because CPI data is delayed. And so in order to, when you're budget setting, we're already looking at the budget in January, so we won't have the CPI data for June right before the year starts. So to allow AOT to do their projections, they need to be able to look back a few months to get seasonally adjusted CPI data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics to get an accurate number. Let's see. And then we're just adding subdivision numbers for the remaining language there. And this brings us to mileage-based user fees. Before I move on, are there any other questions on the town highway funding? Okay. Oh,
We did discuss this before lunch and discussed that looking at the budget calculation, you have the two pieces, the CPI and then the budget calculation. If at the end of the year, money is, returned back or removed from the budget, makes the overall budget look lower from the previous year. And there was some discussion, do we, say the budget is what it has it was passed, not how it sort of ended. And I don't know, what people in the committee think. I don't know if I'm all that worried about it, but it could make the overall budget look small, like it's gone down, when it maybe hasn't. I don't know. Sort of put that out there. Does that make sense?
It does. My question, based on the language, and I'm still learning here, so my question based on the language here is the way it's worded. It's the agency's total appropriations funded by transportation fund revenues, excluding that subsection. That's being where we're looking at the percentage change. So I think what you're saying is, do we say the agency's total appropriations as approved in the annual transportation program or the approved annual transportation program, rather than the end of the year where we may have a budget adjustment act that says we're actually reverting some of this money or we're using it for a different purpose and we're notwithstanding other laws to carry this money somewhere else where we have a budget hole.
Yeah, I guess I'm saying that's an option. I'm not sure, if I
And
understand, how important that is.
I think this is a better question for folks who have a good fiscal understanding of these things, like Candace and Logan, to sort of weigh in on.
Okay, so did you want to?
I just have one question. That Candace can answer. So have we ever not expended these line items? Have we ever had revenue left over at the end of the year to revert somewhere else or in town highway?
Sorry, Candace Elfquist for the record. I understand what you're asking, Representative. I want to say no, but I want to also verify it. So I can do a little stuff on my computer and get back to you in a little bit. Does the committee want me to weigh in on that suggestion?
If you're comfortable with it without, then it's.
I think it would give a better year-over-year picture to reference the base appropriations in the budget bill. So when we say AOT appropriations, we can say sections 900 or B 900 to B 922. And that would exclude the reversions, and that would also exclude AOT pay act.
What was your question? I'll give you a chance to go back at that.
Yeah, I guess, that seems, good. I mean, it's hard for me to say yes without maybe asking a couple more questions. Maybe Logan would be the one to sort of ask for.
No.
So I guess I have one more question on that. So if we have 70,200,000 and it increases 3% because that's a CPI, right? So next year's budget will be 7.2 plus 3%.
No, we don't know.
We don't.
Well, let's just assume.
Oh, just.
And you're assuming that,
Yeah.
and
Okay,
you're
so-
assuming that the T fund increases by 3% or more.
Correct. So that's what we have for the next fiscal year. Well, along about in February, we know that, when the BAA comes about and we're not going to spend the 7.2 plus 3%. So we're going to revert some money out of this fund because we're not going to use it. Are we going to start, when we start calculating for the next fiscal year, 7.2 plus 3%, or the reversion amount? See what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Now-
I,
That You know what I mean? So we only spent 7 million of it. Are we gonna start at 7 million? Or are we gonna start at 7.2?
Well, that certainly wouldn't, starting at the lower number would certainly not be my attempt here, but I understood from
Do you understand? what I'm-
anything that you had said earlier, it can't go lower,
Yeah, it
but you also can't.
can't
go
be
back.
negative,
It's gone
and it's
up.
related to the prior fiscal year's appropriation.
Okay, so it's
Um,
not, the BAA doesn't have anything to do with it.
No, I don't think
Okay.
so.
All right.
Yeah.
then Good.
Good question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So long about.
No, these are good questions to have. It makes me wish that I'd had time to look at all the testimony you took last year on the other section or subsection in here that has this language. Because I imagine there was probably some discussion about that last year,
It was a while ago.
or was it?
Last
The
year.
Quimby thing is older,
Yeah.
although we made an adjustment to it last year, but
Okay.
yes. the
Oh, you're
basic
just talking
fee-
about raising.
Okay.
No, well, I think,
I thought you were referring to the index. That was years ago.
Yeah. So what? So, what we did last year was the town aid program. And what is being proposed here is the same thing for these other two grant programs. That
Right. Highway structures and class 2 highways. Yep.
and along the idea of these reversions that are unspent money or ungranted or there is a situation, because I believe it was town highway that a paving money came back into the fund this year to some level of money, so it could potentially has, even though it may not happen in these two programs, it may happen in the other one. But either way, none of that changes. Once it goes up, it doesn't go back. If it will go up again or stay the same.
Yes.
Okay. President Keating.
In the past, though, the committee had said we're going to go with this amount. Does this statute or bill say that the committee cannot go back?
So nothing you do here can bind a future legislature. So, and this happens all the time. We will have things in statute that say these funds shall be dedicated to X purpose. And then every year in the budget, we say, notwithstanding that section, we're going to take 20% to use as one-time funds to fill this gap. And we're going to take another 10% from over here. And we're going to cut that amount because we've got, I mean, this is my 11th session. I think in 8 or 9 out of 11 sessions, we've had a budget gap that we've had to fill. So every year, best intentions of prior legislatures get put aside, and the appropriations committee makes hard decisions about where they're going to find money.
So that it doesn't
It doesn't-
hamper us
No.
to try to do these things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Statute you can always amend or override. You can't amend or override the Constitution without going through the 4-year process.
We won't do that.
Yeah, so that's, yeah. If you want to have flexibility, don't put it in the Constitution. That's the takeaway here. But yeah, you're not binding yourself to this in the future. It's what it does. What it is you're setting up the default, and then you can always turn off the default as the need arises. Okay. Let me share my screen again. Whoops. So the next sections are actually amending your mileage-based user fee language. And the reason you have to do this is, I believe you've heard some testimony on this, but essentially the language that you passed in 2023 says this program is taking effect on July 1. Well, the federal grant hasn't come through. The program is not ready. And so what this is doing is the bare minimum here, because I haven't been present for committee discussion to know that whether there's different intent, and the bare minimum is moving out the dates by a year to give you time to figure out what to do. And so that's all so section 19 is amending sections 27 through 30 from the 2023 T-bill. And all that we're doing in here is moving out the dates. And I did clarify in here the electric vehicle infrastructure fee because you created that last year. And prior you had said an increased registration fee, and that's what the EV infrastructure fee is. And so otherwise, we've left the references to the Strategic Innovation for Revenue Collection, or SIRC grant, that the state is still pursuing for this. We have left the other language the same. There is a report section where I did not change dates because I think the report has already been filed. And so that section you could actually probably leave out of this. But I put everything in just in case you want to open any of it back up at this point. And it has, as I said, the minimum changes, which is just moving out the dates. And then that would bring us to the EV special fund. But before I move on to that, are there any questions on the mileage-based user fee?
Representative Fuser?
So I see that we treat PEVs different than EVs.
Yes.
What was the reasoning behind that?
I don't know. I apologize. I was covering labor and employment at the time for the legislature. So I would turn to the folks who are in the room.
Please, Michelle, help us. Phone a friend, right?
Michelle Boomhauer, Agency of Transportation. So an all-electric vehicle, we know, we basically know there's not going to be any gas consumption with that vehicle. Whereas a plug-in hybrid could have miles driven on gas, we could have miles driven on electric. We won't be able to know and differentiate which are which. And so we, for the EV infrastructure fee, set up a construct that was about half the cost for the fee that we're charging right now in this interim period of from a full electric. And then when we moved to the mileage-based user fee program, the plan was to charge 1.75% of the annual registration fee for plug-in hybrids because we can't differentiate the mileage.
All right, well, thanks for the reasoning.
Representative.
Yeah, so I totally, understand why we had to change that date because we're not ready to go. But we are considering finding the funds, not waiting for the grant because from the federal government, in fact, I was a betting person, I would bet we're not going to get that grant for this purpose. So that if we were to find the funds, rather than use the grant money to move forward with this, does this language stop us from doing that? I mean, it changes the date when we want to have our goal of getting there, but you have some discussion here. I think there's some discussion here about the grant or not. I mean, does that preclude us from not using the grant at all and just funding the program to get started?
Right, so the language in section 28, I'll pull up here. There are a couple of key pieces that answer your question. First, this provided that for the proposed fiscal year 2024 budget, they would apply for and accept federal grants with up to $350,000 in transportation fund monies authorized for the non-federal match. And then they would utilize those grant monies, and then it doesn't specifically mention not using. I think your limiter there is that up to $350,000 for non-federal match. I think you cannot withstand this or strike that and say, subject to available state and federal funding, they shall do this moving forward. So I think I would clean that up if you end up going with the just state funding for it, anticipating that the federal government is likely to pull back much of the funding related to EVs, if not all of the funding related to EVs that was previously authorized and moving forward. So, but that'll be something that we could do, but that's part of why the language is in here, but it's not amended beyond the bare minimum. I have some, so Logan and I met with Patrick Murphy while we were working on this draft, and we discussed some of the outstanding issues, and I know the agency is looking at it. But I think there's a number of, I came to the conclusion that I didn't have enough to go on to put together a draft without inserting my assumptions and, decision-making for the committee. And that's not my role. So, so that this is left in here so that you can do more work on this as you make those policy decisions, or take the language out if you're just going to take any unaffected language out if you're just going to push out the dates to give yourself time to figure it out next year.
It's still yours. It's still yours.
And this would be, Michelle, we still have in the budget the 350,000 with the hope that we do get the grant, correct?
So we got 350,000 over 2 years, so we have 700,000. And we have been awarded the grant, but we don't think the federal government, we're less than hopeful that they will actually execute the grant with us. And so we are working on a number of fronts to identify, sort of hone our budget a little further and identify additional partners we can work with, like the Eastern Transportation Coalition. They have a grant from a prior cycle that's not an SIRC grant, but is still in the family of mileage-based user fee efforts that we may be able to tag some of our activities to, such as public education and outreach, maybe not everything we need to do. And so probably we just had a preliminary meeting with them yesterday. We're sharing data and information right now. And I would think it may not be until the bill gets to the Senate that we're going to have enough details to understand where we will, how much TETC money we'll have, and then what the gap is going to be. So I think Damien's suggestion of state and federal money, leaving it open-ended, would probably help in terms of and then who knows, maybe the SIRC money will come through, but we're just concerned that we have had as many delays as we've had, and we really need to move forward. The other thing I would mention is I'm not sure if Patrick's going to have all the edits by the end of this week. It'll probably be something we would come back to you with right after the break in terms of looking at modifications to this section. And recognizing that until we start to understand some of the details around operationalization, that we will more than likely have to come back to you. We certainly will have to come back to you next session to set the fee and some of these other more detailed factors that we're working.
Thank you.
All right. Representative McCoy.
So we have a mileage-based user fee that we're proposing for an fully electric vehicle that has to be plugged in. And then we have a PEV, that's a hybrid that they will use gasoline and electric. You gave a percent of, what is the percent based? I didn't hear.
So the percent is 1.75 of the annual registration fee.
Of which is now the $89 additional that we put, so 1 point.
So it would be another $66, I don't know.
Would they pay the 89
Yeah.
plus? Okay. Will the battery electric vehicle also pay the registration fee plus the mileage-based user fees? Okay,
It's like the gas tax. You register your car, you still have to pay gas tax.
okay.
Representative White, is it?
Yeah, so just following up on that, in section 19, so I think we were talking about section 28.
Mhm.
But I'm a little confused. Is the intent of the General Assembly for the state to start collecting a mileage-based user fee from all battery electric vehicles registered in Vermont starting on July 1st, 2026? That's all I thought the mileage-based user fee was intended for all battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. Am I wrong on that?
So I can speak to this a little bit, but you also have folks on the committee and in the room who've been working on this a lot longer than I have. My understanding is that eventually, the thought is that eventually you would move over to that, but that initially you would start with battery electric because they are not paying any gas tax.
Full, okay, so,
And so that's where the EV infrastructure fee came in last year. The full fee is paid by battery electric, a reduced fee is paid by plug-in hybrid in an attempt to sort of approximate lost revenue to the state, despite the continued use of the roads. And so what this was saying, and this is from 2023.
mhm.
So this is not language you're adopting except for the change to 2026. And now that I'm looking at it, I'd probably strike the rest of that sentence since I think we've hit 15% already. And so that language is outdated. But the intent 2 years ago was that we would start collecting it this coming July 1. And obviously we're not there at this point. And so that was just the intent, was that we would start stage 1 of the possible move to a mileage-based user fee. And that there would be a separate infrastructure fee for plug-in hybrids that would come online. And then last year, the committee brought online the infrastructure fee for battery electric and plug-in hybrid to fill the gap in the interim while we waited to see how long this would take. This year, we know we're not going to hit the July 1, 2025 deadline, so we have to push it out.
Mhm.
The other changes,
So can I stop you there for a second?
Yeah.
So number 2, to start subjecting plug-in hybrid electric vehicles that are a pleasure car to an annual or biennial electric vehicle infrastructure fee starting on January 1st, 2025. Isn't
So
that
that-
already happening for plug-in hybrid
So
vehicles?
just
as well as
amending
all
last-
electric vehicle?
I'm amending the 2023 language to reflect reality.
But not referencing the fact that all electric vehicles are also paying that infrastructure fee. You think that's,
I could do that. When I was drafting this yesterday, it was simply a matter of the amount of time it would have taken me to rethink the
Yeah.
section.
just the way I read
So,
it, it
yeah.
makes me think that all electric vehicles are not part of that fee, and we know that they are. So
Yeah,
that's
and
just
I
how I'm reading it.
want to say too that this is an intent section, so it's not actually binding.
Right,
So theoretically, you could leave this out of the bill entirely. I just included all the language and made changes just in case.
right.
So that was sort of, because it's something that is on the to-do list,
Right.
put it in here so it's here. And we can keep working in the bill on it. But yeah, if it gets to the point where it's going to be really time consuming and confusing for everyone to reopen intent language from 2 years ago that doesn't actually affect anyone's legal rights, we could just take the section out of the bill and it wouldn't affect any. Except for people being able to look back historically and go, oh, that was nice. They had such like optimism for how quickly that would be able to develop. And then, you'd move on with the substance.
Okay.
So,
There was another hand. Right, we want to go over here.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to clarify one point that Damien made. which is the EV infrastructure fee, which did start January 1st for all electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles, is not approximate to what the mileage-based user fee. It's about half of what we
Okay.
will anticipate they're paying going forward. I just want to make sure that was clear.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Okay. Let me,
Next language piece.
yes, scroll down to it and then I'll pull up the screen again, just so that folks don't have to watch me scrolling. Okay. All right, so the next piece here is I think so if you remember the annual EV infrastructure fees are, oh, I'm sorry, this is on page 27. We're almost to the end, which is good because my hour is basically up. I know, just give us time to move on to the next thing. So anyway, the annual EV infrastructure fees are dedicated to programs that ACCD administers for getting EV supply equipment out and providing grants to install that at workplaces and multi-unit dwellings. As you know, this year when the transportation program was being put together, this amount got lost in the shuffle. So the request was to create a special fund so that there is a fund where that amount is clearly there so it doesn't get lost in the shuffle going forward. So what this does is we've struck out the allocation to the transportation fund, and instead we're creating the EV supply equipment special fund. The established and managed in accordance with 32 VSA Chapter 7, Subchapter 5 is standard language that we have in any special fund we create. And then we provide that the annual and biennial EV infrastructure fees are deposited in and credited to the fund. And then the fund is available to the Secretary of Commerce and Community Development for those programs administered by the agency to increase access to level 1 and level 2 supply equipment at workplaces and multi-unit dwellings. And I've added in and for necessary costs, that should say costs, not costs incurred in administering the fund. The language at the very end there is optional. If you don't put this language in, then the money for administering it will generally come from the general fund. And it's in the Department of Finance and Management appropriation, I believe. There are administrative costs with special funds because every special fund, even though they're kept in basically one giant state account, they all have to be accounted for separately. So there's time and software required to manage those funds. We are not retaining interest in this fund, so that money will go into the general fund. But beyond that, this money will be in that fund and can be used for this purpose only unless we notwithstand the law.
Guess why, talking about what, 1 or 2 years? Why we're creating this fund, it's just gonna go away anyways, right? Go to the miles base.
And that's a policy question for you.
Yeah, no, I'm not asking you, I was just throwing it out to the committees, why do we?
Will it go away, or are we going to be there for out-of-state people who have to charge their cars? It'll go away?
Well, they won't pay the infrastructure fee
Yeah.
because they won't be registering. Yeah,
Oh, this is the infrastructure fee.
right.
Oh, okay,
You
I thought this
could-
was plugging in at the, I
You-
thought, where does that money go?
So there is the possibility going forward that as you add, if you added in a surcharge on charging, that you could also feed that in. It's not unusual for us to evolve the revenue sources that fund special funds. So that's an option, but again, that becomes a policy discussion of what's your vision for this. And also things like how long do you foresee ACCD needing this fund funding to sort of be providing these grants. So there are a lot of questions about this. There is an administrative cost. I don't know the specific costs. I just know that in our shop, we're always instructed to advise our clients that there is a cost associated with special funds. They aren't these magical things that hold money and don't cost the state anything. So.
Representative White?
I just want to make this comment that I've made before about this language, that I think investing in putting in level 1 chargers is a complete waste of time. I think level 2 chargers make a lot of sense. It takes like 5 days to charge an electric vehicle on a level 1 charger. And I don't know why we would be investing in that. So
5 days.
yeah, a level 1 is like plugging it into just out, the wall.
Oh.
Level 2 is a whole separate category, and it's very, very helpful. But I think that's just a waste of money. So I don't know if we have the ability to strike that out, but that would be my recommendation.
Well, I mean, not to digress, but I think the thought process is that these people are staying overnight. These are at communities, they're at condos, so they're more, I'm not saying just greedy, but that's where the thought process is, that they're plugging in 8 hours in. Yeah, they're not like traveling, but.
Representative Berkowitz.
I think we're gonna know more about this when we hear from CCD on Friday about the program and discuss the level 1 issue too. So.
Is that your comment?
Yes, that was my same.
Okay. Language wise, we will go and, I'm sorry, gentlemen.
So has this got, we're just talking about the fee for registrations, is that correct?
Yep, so this is just the infrastructure fee. So there's the registration fee, and then if you have an EV or plug-in hybrid, you pay that
So
additional
the
fee.
mileage based user fee isn't anything in here?
No,
Okay.
and that, my understanding is the intent is for that to likely go into the T fund.
I would,
Yeah.
I just did a calculation, $1.6 million. If there's 18,000 vehicles at 5,000 miles each at a 0.08 cents per mile, that's $1.26 million a year. So, okay, now I'm going to go really down a rabbit hole. Pardon me, but the committee should know that I have a high explosives license. I sold high explosives for 25 years. I delivered it. So I got some questions about the thing about explosives.
So that-
Sorry.
so- That's okay.
No, you ought to see the fireworks we
That's
put
all
up.
coming out, right?
That's all coming out?
So it's coming out of the bill. The current statute, just to be clear, doesn't prohibit transporting high explosives. It prohibits transporting them in a common carrier with passengers.
With a common, okay, you got to be careful there, because a lot of times in these situations, you have a helper and he's a passenger or it's a passenger.
Yeah, no, we're talking about like a bus. So
Okay.
like putting them in the cargo compartments underneath the bus.
Got it.
Or
So, yeah, I won't go there, but
Or-
so,
yeah.
just so long as you understand that that's the issues that are
Right.
going to be. The other thing is that there is some reference to how things should be labeled.
in the
Yeah,
in the statute itself. This is existing law
it is really.
in Title 20. And my
Leave it alone.
my guess
Sections are coming.
is
They're coming
yeah,
up.
we can look at that.
This wasn't
Separately, if you'd like.
my part in terms of what did get put in.
Because
And-
I've got these
Yeah.
other places.
Yeah,
It wasn't our intention that we would take anything to do with the PUC beyond the clarification of where the Transportation Board was involved and where the PUC was involved, or we will re-clarify that. It was not part of what I thought we'd get into today. Either way, we'll go back on that. There is a request for the mileage-based user fee updates, because we just recently found out that with the hold money on, to sum it up, with the money on hold, we don't have the ability to implement a mileage-based user fee. We may be requesting some other way to find that money to be able to move forward, because generally speaking, we don't want to wait 18 months before we start charging it. But there's got to be language updates. So we will clean that up and tighten that up. With the changes going on in public transit, there may need to be, or is potential language that has to be updated because of some of the potential changes that are going on that we heard about yesterday. And the original purpose of this part was the town highway structures and class 2 road piece that we did get to. in there. We do have testimony on the cancellation projects coming in later this week, and that should get us through about the 8 sections of the bill that are in the bill. The bill's not 28 pages yet. I'm sure we can find a way to add more pieces. Damien will come back with updated and clean. My apologies. We would not normally go into a situation like this without having everybody had this in advance and it's checking off the sections. And we'll be expecting to check off the sections that we all agree on as we go to minimize down to whatever changes that we need to be made. My main goal right that minute and a half of 60, 70 minutes was the town highway changes in the language that represents that piece, plus letting people know that there has to be some changes to NBUF and public transit based on policy we've been hearing about. So we're going to dump that part. We will regroup on the committee discussion of the entire T-bill after Damien's been able to make the changes and any other input that we get. We now have to move on to writing our letter, finishing our letter, or taking the letter to appropriations that's due today on what are the highest priorities of the T-bill, of the transportation budget of our committee going to appropriation. It's a letter from the committee asks the transportation committee what their highest priority are. Be also clear, the letter is from the chair of appropriations to the chair of transportation. My historical experience is it hasn't been opened up for discussion in the past, and it hasn't been a group discussion in response. I'm willing to do that. We have only 50 minutes left to do it. We had agreed that our basic number one priority is making sure that the money does not go out to the JTOC transfer. That's been a huge topic of conversation all through the building. And Representative Burke had talked about that earlier. That has been going on nonstop for the last couple of weeks. Secondarily to that, highlighting our revenue plight that I thought that was well presented today on the flat revenues overall, and that we need a long-term solution was 1A, as presented by our vice chair. And now we have this mileage-based user fee issue where we're saying we're 18 months out or 12 to 18 months out on implementing, and we have to discuss whether we are going to include something about finding that $3 million somewhere in the budget so that the agency can go ahead with mileage-based user fees in the tune of returning $6 million or more a year into the transportation fund. But we do not have the federal program. We don't believe we're getting it. Potentially, we're not going to get it. Do we want to move on with a request or somewhere else in the budget to find the $3 million it's going to take? Or the agency may be coming up with some idea, some this year and some next year that finishes it. But those are sort of the three, unless I missed something, those are the three things so far that we would be looking to put in the letter. If there is anything else than that, there hasn't been any other work that's been done yet, then that the answer is going back by 4 o'clock today. So I'm not sure which one you had first, but please go right ahead, Representative Burke.
I've talked about this before to you, and I believe, Mr. Chair. I was asked by Melissa Bounty, who's the executive director of the Central Vermont Economic Development Corporation, to see if we could get $15,000 for a program that they started with Capstone, but Capstone has now run out of money for the program. And it is for 2 first-time car buyer workshops for electric vehicles or fuel-efficient vehicles to help new Americans, low-income Vermonters, to purchase vehicles, because buying a vehicle can be very confusing. People don't know about funding. They give advice on, loans and how to do that, et cetera. They've been very successful. They're looking for $15,000 for 2 sessions that they hold at a restaurant run by New Americans. And she was wondering, as part of economic development, critical for a thriving workforce to get people in there in how a form of transportation. So I don't know whether this is the right place to bring this up or to put it in the T-bill. So I'm just making this proposal at this moment to see whether this is something we want to ask appropriations for. It's a very small amount of money.
Representative McCoy.
So I'll respond to Representative Burke first. I believe we heard from United Way last week, and they have these exact programs that they run through United Way. I think that was United Way of the Northwest or Northeast that was in here last week. Similarly, United Way of Rutland County, they have these programs that do help first-time buyers of vehicles, low income, whatever, so they're already providing the service. I think we just need to make sure that they're aware of it. My understanding is the PR through United Way, they were gonna make that happen. I forget the name.
I don't know.
Speaking last Friday. So, but do you want her to respond to that, or I have one other?
But you can keep going if you like, or.
So my other ask of this letter is to, I think this is the year, if we're ever gonna claw back that 1/3 of the purchase and use tax, which is like 40 million or 45 million this year, is we
52.
do it this year, put it in our letter. I know they're giving, supposedly we're getting the 20 million JTOF, but we're still behind. So if we can get it this year, having in mind that education funding and, the whole system is up this year, this is the year to do it.
And that's in here.
It isn't.
It is,
Yeah.
it's on
Oh.
page 2.
Yeah, page 2.
Okay, then I'm done.
You got your wish.
Got something.
Okay.
Actually, Representative Burke and
Well,
then to
I
Representative White.
just wanted to, I guess what I'd like to understand is whether the program that we saw for the United Way is in Chittenden County. This is just for Vermont. It's just for central Vermont. That's what I'm saying.
And I'm not quite sure of United Way of who services Central Vermont.
That's what I'm not sure. I wasn't sure that if it was more regionally located in Chittenden County. I can try to find out.
That'd be great.
And Representative White. You want to add
Do you want to
something?
comment on that?
I will eventually, but if you want to.
Sure. So regarding the language for the MBUF, I'm wondering if we wanted to add, that would like to find this $3 million to push the MBUF forward, or ask that the agency could also work towards this collecting a fee on kilowatt hours through electric vehicle supply equipment, which is a different way to be trying to get money that we're not getting through the gas tax to electric vehicles and plug-in electric vehicles. So either, whether it's the MBUF or whether it's a fee on kilowatt hours through our power companies, either way, we are receiving money that we're not getting from the gas tax for these electric vehicles. And I'm just taking that language from what we just went over with Damien.
Representative
Yeah, I don't disagree, and this committee has looked at how to collect electric fees from electric for charging, and you don't know what you're charging at home. There is charging infrastructure around. I mean, from the NEVI program, it would have been something we have our arms around. So I think that we have to continue to look at that, particularly for out-of-state chargers. But right now, the MBUF, I think, be the thing to focus on, because that is, I think, even if we push forward it, there's a lot there and a lot of money to try to collect it. So there's a lot of infrastructure associated with it. So we've had testimony, and we've strongly consider that that's something to move to in the future. It just is not an immediate thing that you, like MBUF, we kind of know how it will work, and it's something conceivably could be turned on in a year.
Right.
So.
We just would miss the out-of-state.
Well, yeah, we know that the out-of-state contribution is something we are missing now for electric, and we will continue to. It was my personal hope that the NEVI system, something the state sort of has control and it's on the highways, could be something that we might be able to do, but I think it's very messy. My point of view. I'm not against it, and I want to move that in that direction, but I'm not sure this letter would be, I want to focus on that MBUF.
Anybody else? I guess I would say to Representative Burke's $15,000 request related to the piece, I don't have a strong opinion one way or another. I've not seen this process used for that. I don't know how the transportation fund is used to ask for specific small earthquake pieces. I did hear workforce development. I know there are bills out there in the workforce development. I really am not sure where to go or what to do with that particular piece. So I don't see it as part of the letter to the head of appropriations that's dealing with a statewide budget, but I also don't know how I would respond to it necessarily, but I don't see it as in selling our $853 million transportation budget, but I don't want to think that anybody in the committee wants to respond that they don't aren't sensitive to the needs of. We always want everybody to buy more vehicles. We want to keep them more of that 1/3 of the sales and use tax. But as far as the mileage-based user fee piece goes, it's a recent, very quick development, and it's just happened in the last X number of weeks. If we can frame the letter in a way that says, with this money, we will move up sooner. Without the money, I don't know how long it's going to take. If you comment to that, but if we don't make the changes in the language and we don't ask for the money, how much longer are we going to go without electric vehicles paying their share of their impact on the infrastructure? And I hear that most people that own an electric vehicle in this building are willing to say that they pay their fair share. I think there's a pretty significant feedback that I receive regularly that they would prefer not to have that label of not paying their share, that they want to pay their share. So I'd like to know how we move that piece forward. So we come to next.
No, I mean, I totally agree with you. I mean, I guess the way I look at this letter is that, and there's nothing against the 15,000 or pros and cons of it, but in one sense, I think you have to be consistent about, our priorities. And I don't know if that's sort of gonna water down our ask of saying, oh my God, they're asking 15,000. I think if we're consistent in our mission of saying that, the transportation fund is going to be in dire straits in the upcoming years. And this is what we need to do to correct it, to get us right back on the right path. I think it's more sustainable, it's more relatable for making our argument and saying, yeah, we need that 20 million on a regular basis. We need to claw back the purchase and use tax. And yeah, we have more revenue that we can get miles based. I think if you just go boom, 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 it all fits together. Not quite sure about throwing in the 15,000 and like, God, what are they doing? Yeah, no, I don't want to pile on.
No, I understand. No, I'm just trying to, I think there are other avenues you can pursue. Maybe it's more appropriate in the T-bill.
Do we want to ask, okay, thank you. Michelle, did you have a comment, Michelle?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to reflect on the fact that this EV environment is very complicated right at the moment, as we've been discussing. Just for Representative White's background, we have recognized that collecting a fee at the charging station for, in particular, people from out of state, because most Vermonters will charge at home, is an important next step, but we really had to prioritize, are we going to work on this or this? The good news is, while we have been waiting to work on the mileage-based user fee, many states have gone forward, and the technology is improving for collecting a fee at the charging station. So I think when we get to that point, we will be in a pretty good place. In terms of finding the additional money for the mileage-based user fee, I think one avenue the committee could consider would be, well, and I'll preface this first by saying that because the NEVI program has not gone away, we're going to have $0 to implement more highway network charging. And, part of the reason the government is investing in highway network charging is because, we're at the beginning of the adoption curve, and, the regular market would take over at some time. We're not going to have incentives. And so continuing to support charging at the home and workplace may not be the best investment, because folks who would typically have been able to afford an EV with the federal tax credits and the EV incentives now are not going to have access to those pieces. And so would it make more sense to take the proceeds from the EV infrastructure fee and plow that back into making the MBUF work? So for FY 26, that would be about 1.4 million. Plus the 700,000 we already have, we're getting closer to what we need, in terms of, nailing that one. So just another way to look at it. It is complicated.
And we haven't heard what the CCD has
Right.
done with that money or planning to do with that money or what they've done without it.
Yes.
We haven't heard that. We're here that on Friday.
Friday.
We have to send our letter today. Representative Humphrey, you?
No, I was gonna say, I'd be waiting to hear testimony from where the program is. I mean, the previous testimony we had, it seemed very successful and it was really just starting to move forward. And so I'm curious to see how it goes.
Anybody else? Do we want to, I guess I'm just part of our bouncing around subjects. Should we go directly to the piece if there's comments about? Did we? Our legislative council outline our 1A effectively?
The only thing, I guess, maybe a tweak on the purchase and use, this sounds like we want it all back now. Maybe we should gradually rescind purchase and use over X amount of time.
I would say that I was thinking about adding something, we're looking at multiple options, that we have to consider, I'm on the same thought process you are, that saying, do we need to?
I was gonna say those greedy son.
I'll be. Well, it feels oftentimes like everybody is when it comes to these letters, but that's not the,
Yeah.
but we are looking at some level of options of staging it down,
Yeah.
some level of piece to stage it down or to find a different way. To handle it. I don't
Over
know.
3 years or something.
Whatever, it just makes it look like we don't want it now, that's
But we're
not.
looking at, we
We do it. Yeah.
Well, trot down there.
But I like to our counterpart in appropriations, Representative Kaczynski. I think he's our,
Yeah.
Appropriations.
He's on to
he knows where we stand.
Representative, sorry, also. Representative.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, so we send this letter off, do we get to testify? Does somebody get to go over there and explain?
That is not for certain, but I was insinuated that there's a potential invitation for chairs to potentially chairs or vice chairs to be invited to appropriations after all the letters are received, but that has not been confirmed, and I haven't sat in this chair before, so I couldn't tell you if it's tradition or not.
I can't recall any.
But
changes.
it was mentioned that there may be invitations to chairs but that didn't come from the chair of appropriations. It came from one of these multiple liaisons that have come to our committee from various committees. Yes,
So is your suggestion of tiering it, perhaps they would go along with it?
It's just more palatable saying that, give us all $52 million now, I mean, just say you gradually reduce it. And I don't know if you want to make reference to the education reform, just to coincide with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that whether we say that we're stepping it down or we say that we are looking at multiple options,
Yeah.
but that we view that as our
Goal. is to
source
get
and
money
goal
back.
is to manage the T fund with T fund dollars.
Correct.
That would be our statement, right? We want to manage the T fund with all of the T fund dollars. And we're looking for some way to get to that piece. Is that what we're really trying to say? Is it
Yes.
while we continue to explore all kinds of new revenue ideas, but our first goal might, well, I wouldn't say we're gonna word it that way, but that we would want to help keep the T fund dollars in the T fund or manage the T fund with T fund dollars is the reality that we feel that we're headed towards, especially with the emphasis on the revenues. Does that convey what we're thinking? Because I don't necessarily want to guarantee that how we're gonna step it down or where we're gonna step it. We want to convey that message. We're looking for all kinds of options.
And everything's on the table.
Everything's on the table in terms of, I don't know if that's our exact expression, but in terms of finding a way to manage the T fund within the T fund dollars that are out there. Please go.
Just on, given that we know that the education reform is going to be a multi-year process. I think it makes a lot of sense for us to propose maybe a 3-year process of moving towards, not asking for all the education or the, purchase and use monies right away, but maybe over a 3-year period, just as we don't know whether it's gonna be 2 years or 5 years, but I think that makes it a lot more palatable. I support
But we
that.
want the 20 million J top.
That's our
No,
number.
that's
That's the first
number
one.
one, yeah.
That's the first one. If the copy of the letter, I don't know if you have it, but yes or no.
Yeah, I don't know if it, maybe symbolically, we could ask for, just to kick it off, like to say show we're serious, ask for 1%. This year, it's 1.6 million, but it's not nothing. And that could go into our town, our municipal side of our concerns. Just to kind of make the point. It's a small amount, but it's a start.
I like that.
My concern is we go back next year and they go, we gave you
Yeah.
5 million last year, now you're back for more. That's my concern with now, pulling it back now. Once we have it, we have it. Now, I possibly can go along with the step down approach because, I think with what I've seen in the draft for education, it is like a 2 to 3 year until they're fully rolled out. So I could certainly go along with like a third over the next 3 years, but I certainly don't want, because they're going to come back. So, I can hear it now.
So we're having a significant amount of dialogue about the long-term issues, and I know that the agency's been into approach now, I think 4 times already this session, which seems to me to be a lot. So they're getting an education on where they're heading. So I feel good about that. I really want to reinforce that with the letter. And we definitely want to highlight, I really agree that highlighting the education reform issue and that we want to manage transportation with transportation funds. In other words, of finding a way to keep them here, whatever approach that is, and we're looking at them. So I'm hoping that Damien's kind of gathering what I'm saying right now to some degree or another, that as long as when I'm going off track, somebody will stop nodding and whatnot. And then that's our piece. And then one of the revenue opportunities, then we move on to the MBUF saying there is a revenue opportunity here because of the loss of the money. If there were $3 million from the general fund, we would be projecting the $6 million return in the first year of collecting it. Do we need to state that we don't have transportation funds to spend on that? It was coming from the NEVI program. If you have $3 million, we can get you back 6 next year. It's already in the legislation to do it. We're not raising it. That needs to be clear somehow. We're not raising the fee. It's already been raised. It's already passed in the law. We're not adding a new fee. The T-bill is not saying we're adding a new fee. It's saying we need to implement what's been previously passed. So I would want that to be understood that we are not currently, we're still going back to the T-bill work. We may or may not be proposing a fee, but we're not on the MBUF is not a new fee. It's already in place or expected to be in place, I guess. Okay. I
have some
You have a
revised language. Hold on, I'm just gonna highlight it for you. And I'm working on the MBUF language. But if you want to look at
You don't have to do it right this minute in front of us.
you want to look at the revised language, and then give me a few minutes, I can get you the MBUF language, and then it's all good. We can get it edited and out the door by 4.
So we could let you work on it. We can move on to another subject and circle back on it if you want. Yeah. Give you some time to work on it. I'll go in another direction for a minute.
So I've got the changes highlighted so far. Do you want me to do the MBUF language too, and then we'll come back? Just do it all at once.
If you can do it, right? If you want to work on it now, while I talk about it.
Give me 2 seconds.
I think that and for the members that have been around a little while, this may sound, or this be total repeat for the newer members. Wherever we went today for a little bit odd on the way it worked out in terms of presentation, that the bill had expanded from 10 to 28, and I apologize for that issue. You have a copy of the original draft. There's now a 2.1, which will become either a 2.2 or a 3.1 or however that works in the numbering system. It was 10 pages. It exploded up to 28. It's going to come back to some level of number. Each section represents a piece. And what will happen is in the next committee discussion, in this case, right after we get back, I'm going to bring up the committee discussion on the bill and say, okay, are we all set with section 1, which in this case is just terms and definitions? And I'm going to expect to go around the room, and it's not a straw poll, but it's if every single person has to nod their head. And if they want to nod their head this way, then you have to explain what's missing, what do you want to have changed, what additional testimony do you need, et cetera. Then we're going to go to section 2 and say, okay, in section 2 in this case, St. Albans Town, I believe St. Albans Town, section 2, that says they want to take over that highway. We've gotten a letter from the select board. We've got the testimony. The agency's okay with it. To my perspective, what else could we possibly need? That they want it, they agreed they want it, and the agency's let it to go. Does anybody disagree with that section? I would say, are you okay with leaving this section in? And you'll either nod yes or no. And if there's a no, then you need to let me know before the next meeting that there's a problem, that you don't think we can move on with Route 36 annexation by St. Albans Town. But from my perspective, we've gotten every side of that and we're good to move on. And then we will go to section 3 and that's the project cancellation piece. We have more testimony coming in this week, so we're not ready to say yes or no. I wouldn't ask you that yet because we're going to hear from League of Cities and Towns and regional planning commissions. So we're going to go from there. And then section 4, 4, 5, and 6 are sort of kind of all rail use issues and word piece. They kind of go together. And I'm going to say, which we should be pretty close to right now, we listen to how the agency feels that they need to adjust the rail management language. We've heard that testimony. We do have a small correction. I've asked Damian to go back and put in regards to the fishing to make it clear we're not making rules about fishing and whatnot. I am in this particular section. Is there anybody else that needs to be heard from? Do you have any other concerns about the rail section, the rail usage piece? So if you have a homework assignment, you need to let me know. Right now, I don't have anything scheduled for anyone else that we need to hear from, that we've heard all we need to hear on the rail piece. If you don't think so, I need to know before we come back so we can schedule that testimony the first week back after town meeting. And so I'm not asking, if somebody knows that they have a problem with it, then let me know right after the meeting. But if there are no problems with it, as far as I'm concerned, that's going to be another yes. But I will get you additional testimony if there's something on that section that you feel we need. I'm not aware of it. We've talked about it. We don't know that there's anybody else that needs to come in on that. But if somebody else here, this is your chance. Section 7, which is only the small piece of section 7, T-Board, we heard from the T-Board and we heard from the agency, and we heard from the T-Board within the agency exactly how that relationship is. I'm not always 100% clear on, but they're all yes on that small section of section 7. And unless I hear from somewhere else, we're ready to move on to that section of the T-bill. Okay, and then you got to jump all the way to section 18 because all those other ones are coming out. Section 18 is what was just proposed today related to the town highways, town structure, town class 2 roads and town highways. I don't want to say it wrong about putting in the escalator and related to the T fund revenues or the CPI. We will find out. Now, in this case, we haven't heard from anybody else. So we'll ask the agency if they want to come in and comment. We will ask if you feel we need anybody from a town to come in and comment. If you have any concerns, you need to let me know that. Okay, because at this point, this is your first shot at proposal. So there's your homework. You got to let me know if there's anybody else we need to hear from related to this escalation on town. So you have homework here before we get back from, or when we come back. Section 19 is brand new today, MBUF related. We need to update the language so that we continue the program going with the new reality we face. I do feel like I'm not entirely clear on that. I didn't review it prior to today. So I will at least revisit it from a little bit of help. I don't feel like I fully understand exactly what we do, only because I left early yesterday. It came out. I didn't have any chance to read anything last night. I haven't read anything today. So that was a new one. Not new. I knew it was being worked on. I wasn't ready to comment on that. So I feel we'll have to revisit that again. And then section jumps up to section 28, I think it was. I might have missed the public transit section, but there's a little bit of language potentially that will need to be changed on public transit. That's part I haven't read yet either. That was brand new. If you have issues about what that language is, we're gonna have to hit that again. And the mileage-based user fee, sorry, is 19 and 28, I believe it is. I'll check my notes, but that's the last section. Then that's the T-bill as it is right now. Or as of right now, that's the T-bill sections. You got about 3 or 4 sections there. If you want to make any changes or you want to hear any more testimony, I need to know before we come back, before we leave this week, so we can line it up for the week after town meeting. If there are any other pieces that we're considering, like what Representative Burke had asked today about the program that she was talking about, but if there's anything else that's coming, you got 1 week after we get back to be what you need or don't need. But for the T-bill as it stands right now, you got 3 or 4 sections. You can let me know if I'm missing something. And then I stalled it out there a fair amount. That's the picture. I'm going to put a check mark next to each section the way our previous chair did, that we all head nodded. The goal here is that when we get to the end, unless something comes up between now and now, right, my perspective, we'd be at an 11-0 vote, because I haven't seen anybody move their head this way yet. We're not, there may be, but right now I haven't seen that as far as these sections go.
Don't tempt us.
Well, you know, so, but we do have we have until the 21st. The speaker has asked us to put it out early if we can, but we do have till the 21st of March, because we are a policy and money bill. I am responding to her in terms, right now, we're moving forward and we could be early. But as our vice chair says, you never want to do anything any sooner than you have to, or something to that. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but holding on to
Hold on to things. You never know what's gonna come up. Yeah.
So that is, we do have that, but there is opening. So yes, Representative Burke.
Just, when you say we have to the 21st, do you mean that we have here in this room to the 21st to get it out, because it might not go to another?
Right, good point. So we don't have that long, do we? Having not been through this before, I don't exactly understand where it would have to go and how.
I guess it would depend.
We wouldn't want to wait, we can't wait till the last day, I guess, right? It has to get passed by the last day. Is that what it is?
I think it's just gonna put it.
I think we try to usually, like either that Friday, the 14th, or that Tuesday, just so if it has to go to Ways and Means.
Does it have to get to Ways and Means and those before it can go on,
We do that,
before the 21st?
we do that delivery.
No, because that has to go on the floor too, but they should see
If
it.
there's any,
Yeah.
Delivery fee, for example.
even by putting NBUF in it, they're probably gonna want to review it to say, oh yeah, this is already in place, right? So
It
we're
might be
pretty much
helpful to
guaranteed.
talk to the chair to
So as far as
To just
how it.
give some kind of advance notice that something would be happening. That's my suggestion.
So how it, I need to know exactly how the ending of that piece works, and I don't know. I haven't been involved in that, but like, what date we actually have. We know that we have the week after town meeting.
Historically, we don't wait till that last day. I think we try to get it back early.
She's definitely asking for it early. So, there, I do have that pressure. Please, yeah.
In the South Coast Transportation. So in the absence of the special fund language being included anywhere, we would just need a one-time appropriation somewhere. If the committee still wanted us to transfer funds to ACCD for those level 1 and level 2 EVSE programs, because that wasn't oversight in this year's budget. So in the absence of creating a special fund, we don't have the spending authority in 26 to give money to ACCD. Just want to make that clear.
And I should have left off section 26 then as the possible section, or section 20, I guess it is, as a special fund.
That would be my preferable route, is just do a one-time approach instead of creating this whole fund and have administrative costs, everything outside.
Section 20. So I didn't say there, so our vice chair is just letting me know his opinion of section 20. I would like to hear from other people at some point, not necessarily right now, where they sit on section 20. But those of you who joke about it being school, I guess you just got your homeworks. And your what does they call that, lesson planning for the next couple of weeks? Representative Phelps?
So there is another bill, which we're calling Kurt's bill, which has a number of policies, a couple of money asks, I guess. But policy possibilities that some of them have been discussed here. And we're kind of still waiting for that to get through the system. I'm not quite sure.
Give you an update on where it is.
Yeah, it's been delayed for
There's a huge backlog of House bills,
Getting one.
and it came in close to the end of the House bill approvals. So let me see what that is.
Okay. So that's a preview piece.
It'll be on our desk here.
Did I drag that out enough for you, Damien, to get back to the letter?
Yes, you did.
I'm sorry.
No, in my
That's a
hope is
preview.
we have Damien, once it comes out, have Damien go through it briefly, maybe some of the highlights of ones that, you know, we would strongly like to consider.
And we should have a recommendation for testimony.
Yes,
As needed, yeah.
because we have to hear, we'll have to hear. You can't, yeah. So we're all, I think we know what we're saying there, Representative Martin.
So, Mr. Chair, just a clarification on our process. If there are any ideas that are not reflected in what we just looked at today, and that are not reflected in the bill that Representative Couch and Burke are working on, we should present them this week and then
Yes.
some thought
and
about
there's a good spot
testimony.
Where if there's going to need to be language, you're going to have to ask to get it drafted and you're going to, right, we're in that time frame right now.
And part two of that is, and this is just, I'm not understanding the process. So a new idea, it wouldn't be appropriate to ask Damien, who's working on the T-bill right here, to incorporate something else into what this here would have to kind of go
You would
a separate
ask,
route.
and help me when I get in trouble here, from my perspective, if you have an idea that you're considering it should go into the T-bill, you would ask other members of the committee and or just yourself, and you can ask our legislative council to draft some language that you would then like to be included. And my understanding of the process, it's not going to go in there until you would bring it and present it or work with us, and then we would potentially put it in. It would have to come and be on the agenda and understand what testimony we need to hear about it. So I don't believe he would be able to put it in there without it coming through and having testimony scheduled, but Damien would be able to would draft it. And I would also recommend that if it's transportation related, anything that you're looking to draft, you would want to go through the agency to get their take on it before it even was brought here to potentially get in there. So take your idea, share it amongst, if you think you need to.
Kind of
and ask
hypothetical,
Damien-
just.
And ask Damien to draft something. Run it by, I would, before you ask Damien to draft it, given the amount of time that they're obviously backlogged, I'd want the agency's opinion. I would get the agency opinion. You can do whatever you want. I don't get to tell you what to do. I don't live in your district. So I would, if I were doing it, I'd be going there to there or there to there, but I wouldn't go anywhere without going here first. That's me. You can do that. However, not everybody goes that way, but he wouldn't be able to draft it. They would want their opinion on it. Very first thing of any new language I'm going to do in the first place is ask the agency what their position is on top of,
Thank you.
or the DMV or whoever else it's related to. So that helps.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Where are we at, Damien?
So I've got language for you. The answer on Kurt's bill is it has a number, but it has not gone to the printer yet. It should be out tomorrow, hopefully. There are 11 House bills still pending. It is one of them. That's all I can say.
Thank you for your help today.
So,
Okay, we may not finish it right now.
All right.
Okay, but I will come back up or go chase him to his office.
So as you were talking, I was making amendments on the fly. So first in the introduction, where I go through some of the pressures on the transportation fund, slow rate of growth over the last 10 years, rising personnel and construction costs, diminishing miles paved, limited funding for municipal infrastructure, and the state being less able to address creating a resilient transportation network in the face of flooding and so forth. The committee is providing the following recommendations to support the long-term health of the transportation fund and the state's transportation program. So kind of driving that point home that this isn't a one-time sort of, plug a gap for us this year request. The first section here says the committee supports the proposal in the governor's recommended budget to discontinue the transportation fund's 20.25 million annual support for the state police, which is commonly referred to as the JTOC transfer. Those funds are sorely needed to support the state's ability to keep up with expected non-federal match needs and the growth in base costs. Without those funds in fiscal year 26, the agency will be required to cancel or postpone 11 paving projects, 1 road project, 14 rail projects, and 7 aviation projects, as well as reduce the amount of SALT and employee overtime available for winter road maintenance. I think that is less than the full list, but that was what I gathered as sort of a nutshell. The next piece here is the reallocation of the revenues, not the all revenues, from the purchase and use tax to the transportation fund. So I noted that as enacted, the stated purpose of the purchase and use tax is to improve and maintain the state and interstate highway systems and pay the principal and interest on bonds issued for the improvement and maintenance of those systems. And it's also worth noting that the purchase and use tax itself says that 100% of the proceeds will go towards transportation. It's only when you get into the education statutes that you find the law that says 1/3 comes to education. The committee requests that those revenues gradually be reallocated to the transportation fund over a period of 3 years to ensure more sustainable funding for the state's transportation program moving forward. The committee acknowledges the significant funding challenges faced by the state's education system and is proposing a gradual reallocation of the motor vehicle purchase and use tax to ensure that the transition can occur in concert with any reforms to the state's education funding system. The committee believes that this gradual reallocation of the motor vehicle purchase and use tax to serve its intended purpose, or its original intended purpose, will help ensure the ongoing health of the transportation fund in a manner that supports the ongoing maintenance. It's 2 ongoings. The maintenance and improvement of the state's transportation infrastructure. Does that capture that?
Yeah, no, good. I guess the only thing I'm sort of hung up on is the original intent. I think the original intent was always to put the education fund when it was originally established. I think the Logan's, he did a breakdown over the year. It wasn't like it was like part of the gas tax and part of the purchase and use.
Yeah.
So, they're split hairs, but they're probably not gonna know, but the original use was probably intended for it to go outside the transportation fund, is my point, but you can leave it in there.
Okay.
We will, I guess what we'll have to do is come back, go through the rest of it. And with
Okay.
Damien, we will, you'll get a copy of it from, when we get the spot, you'll get a chance to link your last comment through emails or up to us after, and we'll deliver it before the end of the business day today. So look at it for you in your email and then come back to combat. You and I will work on it. We're adjourned for this afternoon. So